This is our Suburb Trends episode for May 2022, and we're trying something different. Suburb Karaoke. What is this all about? A bit of fun mixed in with serious property data. We'll be covering areas that our listeners have asked about, parts of FNQ, Tassie, Northern Rivers in New South Wales, Bayside Melbourne, outer suburbs of Brisbane, and beaches south of Adelaide.
Welcome to The Elephant in the Room. This is the podcast where we love to talk about the big things in property that never usually get talked about. I'm Veronica Morgan, real estate agent, buyer's agent, co-host of Foxtel's Location Australia, and author of Auction Ready.
And I'm Chris Bates, mortgage broker. Before we get started, I need to let you know that nothing we say on here can be taken as personal advice. We always recommend you engage the services of a professional.
Don't forget that you can access the transcript for this episode on the website, as well as download our free full or forecaster report, Which Experts Can You Trust to Get It Right? theelephantintheroom.com.au.
This month, Kent is introducing us to Suburb Karaoke. Can you kick us off by briefly explaining what we're in for, Kent?
Yes, what I do is I take a request, like a karaoke request from somebody saying, hey, I've got a suburb, will you look at it? And the background to this was actually doing it in a Facebook Live session. So people would throw suburbs at me live and I would have to respond and do research real time. And I'm using my own software, my own map, the Suburb Trends stuff. So I know where everything is, and I was cutting and pasting. Long story short, Facebook killed it because I was putting so much content in there so fast they thought it was a robot, and that was the end of it.
You're kidding me. I did not know that.
So I was helping people. It was genuine. And because it was so fast in my cut and paste and responding, because it was a live session, but in text format and images, and Facebook didn't like it.
That is you broke Facebook.
Yeah. So anyway, they can go, and you know what?
So now we're doing it on the elephant instead.
Here we go.
Oh, that is interesting. I did not know that. I just thought you got sick of Facebook because I know you got sick of Facebook
I am. I'm
for
sick
other
of
reasons.
Facebook. Totally sick of Facebook, but different topic.
All right. So let's kick off. We did ask listeners some time back for some requests, and we did get some. So let's start with Tracy's question. She said she wanted to ask if we had anyone experienced in the Ballina region. Now, I will just drop in here that we did interview a buyer's agent from that area, Michael Murray, some time back. He didn't talk a lot about Ballina, but it might be worth going back and listening to that episode. That's number 173. But for the purpose of this, the question is it a good idea to buy a house in as an investment? This is written before the floods, by the way. Is West Ballina too industrial? Will the spread from Byron and Lennox Head reach Ballina as a good place to live, affordable rent and sense of community? Where to stay away from? Water with potential floods. So she was onto it. Is it a solid option for capital growth? So over to you, Kent.
Yes, well, the first thing I like to do is look at a satellite image and zoom in. And you've got one side of the Pacific Highway is the coast and the river. On the other side, a smaller river runs up there, but you've got a lot of swamp on the other side of it. So when you think of Ballina, or when you think of West Ballina, I think for a long time to come we will be thinking of floods. So a couple of suburbs that I'd certainly recommend to look at, that it's only just up the road, but literally up, Alstonville, Wollongbar are a couple, and then Gunnellabar. So these are suburbs that have been appearing on my radar because of the data speaking for itself. And these are really good old established suburbs. They're a bit further up, they're higher. So no doubt they'll be in a bit of demand right now. And the rental markets all the way through this area, they've been solid. But what we're trying to do is obviously identify the locations that are going to have the better capital gains as first priority, and then yields as a second priority. So I would probably sidestep West Ballina, and I'd go a few suburbs up the road.
Interesting stuff. So I love the map. I know that Chris loves maps, and through Chris's, interest in reading maps, I've discovered the joys of them as well. The swamp, how do you see swamp on a map though?
Well, yeah, you start with the satellite image and you zoom in, and if you just keep on zooming in, it's just on the other side of Tevan Road there, you'll see sitting between a creek, so Emigrant Creek it's called. Between the two, you'll see several spots there that are effectively swamps. So, West Ballina, there's a bit of land as well, and a lot of that land along there is probably still being used for sugarcane. And, it's only a matter of time where that gets rezoned, or it may already be rezoned, and suddenly you've got a new estate or a new industrial area as well. So, there's quite a few good things we like to look at when we zoom in on these satellite images is how much land is there around the spot. So will we have that constraint of supply looking forward? And West Ballina's got plenty of land. It's got plenty of swamp as well.
It's only last week we had a client looking at Ballina, so it was just a coincidence here, and I was chatting to him about it. And it's sort of my view is if you're the work from home movement's a big part of this, right? So what's driven prices in the last 2 years, but what's going to keep on driving it long term is people being able to work remote and high income people moving there and potentially commuting. And what I love about Ballina is the airport, right? It's 4 flights to Sydney a day, not just one. As you can go to Melbourne, and if you book in advance, you're only looking $150 return. So you can fly pretty cheaply and pretty quickly to our capital cities. But if people are moving there and they're leaving our capital cities, where do they want to be? They want to be on the beach, right? And so I'd be looking at the sort of the beachside suburbs, and this client in particular was looking at places like Skenner's Head, and Lennox Head and things like that, just to the north of Ballina, because or your hinterland properties, and they actually coincidentally, Kent, we're actually looking at Alstonville. They were like, it's a bit cheap. They're a bit cheaper. They're like, look, we can go to the sort of beach suburb, but we quite also like Alstonville. We've got a good community, and it's we can still easily get to the town. We can still easily get to the beach as well, and it's just a little bit out of town, but not too secluded. And so it was really interesting, sort of chatting to them, and I absolutely think that it'll do well, especially because of the airport. And you'll have to come back after the floods, but also that probably caused a lot of money get reinvested back into the town and new shops and new businesses, etc. So, I think it's a great bet.
Well, the roads have been fantastic for some time, but one big new development further north is the new Tweed Valley Hospital. So, anything up towards that end of town is very much going to benefit from that new hospital.
The flooding is an interesting thing, and I think I can't remember when we're going to release this episode. I think it's actually after our interview with a historian who has written all about Brisbane floods going back well over 100 years. And so it is going to be interesting around, the impact of the floods around this area. However, we do have short memories, but I wonder whether the New South Wales governments and local governments and also the federal government are going to bite the bullet and actually relocate some of those people in low-lying areas. But I know someone that actually has a place up in Maclean's Ridges, and they showed me an aerial shot of the place without a flood and then with the flood. And where they are, it was like an island in a huge sea. I was actually shocked. I knew there were floods, but honestly, this was next level. And certainly Alstonville and those places that are up high, the value of being right outside the flood zone is fresh in everyone's minds now. I just wonder how permanent that will stay.
Yes, I looked at quite a few white papers over the years, and the lesson learned is the lasting effect is ultimately insurance if it flows on to valuations and policy. So I think if the insurance changes permanently, so do prices. Yep. If insurance doesn't change permanently, people do have very short memories.
Right. The problem is then people don't often get the insurance quote before they buy the property. But I guess if word gets around, that will impact on prices, that's for sure. All right, our next suburbs from Zachary. Elwood in Victoria. It's an inner Melbourne suburb next to St Kilda with an interesting building makeup reunits. This is what Zachary's saying. As we know, unit data includes both old-style small blocks and new off-the-plan apartments. This makes the growth data hard to interpret as most of those property types get mashed together to make up the apartment market. Certainly been listening to us. He knows that we whinge about that too. Elwood, however, has very few new apartments compared to old apartments. Wondering if Kent could examine the apartment trends here as an almost natural experiment, i.e. the growth of old-style apartments as 90% are old. Alternatively, does Kent have a way to examine growth for apartments given they are greater than X years old, for example? Great question. And what do we have?
Yes, look, overall, I looked at the SA3 of Port Phillip that it belongs to, and units across the board have been rather lacklustre. Yes, there is a distinct submarket group, which is the older style walk-up units. That's a given. Your Art Deco is another submarket group. So, yes, you do have multiple submarket groups that apply to units. But overall, as an asset class, I keep on saying it's around half. I'm averaging out on a national level here, but it's around half the long-term capital growth. So the biggest call out, the biggest problem we're going to see in the next 6 to 12 months is because of affordability in the capital cities, a lot of people are going to be highlighting, or it'll be certainly be in the headlines, how well units are performing. But that'll be a very short-term perspective, how well they've done in the last year or how long they've done in the last 2 or 3 years off a rather subdued base. And if you zoom out to that 10-year view, it's typically half of what you get from a house. So with that said, looking at Port Phillip SA3, 2% per annum compared to houses, 9%. So neither market's really done extraordinarily well when you compare to some others areas that we're saying, 20% growth and some crazy figures in the last few years. But it's done well, reasonably well over the last 10 years for houses, but not so for units. So I'd certainly be cautious about jumping into the unit market if you don't have to. And I think the other couple of key things for Melbourne in particular is a lot of the build to rent people are focusing in on Melbourne and Sydney. Just it's their easy, it's their go-to. So you're going to get a lot of competition from the build to rent space. Now, just a point regards to what Zachary was asking about, how do I distinguish and look at the growth rate? I think an easy way to do it is get yourself a list of properties that you know are older style and just look them up on REA Domain and look at their sale history and then just record the growth rate, the average annual growth rate for each one just by looking at their sale history. So obviously you need a recent sale and then a historical sale, say, 5, 10, 15 years ago. And then just do that a few times and you'll get a pretty good feel. One of the problems with the newer stock, obviously you're not going to have those repeat sales. So you'll probably have to rely on apartments that are 5 or 6 years old to then start to look at repeat sales there.
It's sort of sad, isn't it? Because even though Elwood has a higher proportion of older builds than new builds compared to some other suburbs, it's still impacted by the fact there's been a massive oversupply in Melbourne, though, isn't it? I mean, it's a bit like some of the suburbs in Sydney that have been impacted, the knock-on effect of too much development in nearby suburbs.
I think with Melbourne and Elwood, if you're going to own a unit, you'd think this is one of the better spots, right? It really appeals to sort of young families. Houses are, from what I'm looking at, more in that sort of $2.5 to sort of $3 million range. But if you're going to get like a smaller 2-bed or a 1-bed, that's not going to suit the family market. The thing that's really going to drive unit prices up in Melbourne is when the families can't afford to buy houses in areas that they want to live. So they can't afford to buy in the east, they can't afford to buy in the inner ring, in the north, in the good parts of the inner west. They don't really want to go to Geelong or Mornington or to the middle and outer suburbs. So then the high-income family market shifts to the apartments and they go, well, where's our dream suburbs to own an apartment? And Elwood would be behind that list because it's a bit quieter than, say, St Kilda's, got a few challenges with, demographics and people and renters and things like that and noise. So families don't want to be in that. Maybe they don't want to be a bit further down like Brighton, and even though that would probably be a good place as well. But that would be a great pocket from that. And there's very little development. And if they build new stuff, it's going to be higher priced than the current stock from what I probably would guess, because it would probably suit the downsizers rather than the families. It's a better market to sell to. So I think it's a great place to own a unit. Would I buy a unit there as the number one choice? I probably wouldn't. I mean, I think you're waiting for that to happen. And the people who did that the last few years, would have missed out on all the growth if they went into the housing market. And so, from a long-term point of view, is it one of the better places to own a unit in Melbourne? Yes, but is that the best place to have, $1 million, which is probably what you're going to have to roughly spend to get a bigger, older apartment with parking on a good street in Elwood, and that's how I'd be thinking about it.
I guess the biggest problem is that if someone can only invest $1 million, they're not going to be able to afford to buy a house, are they? So that therein lies the problem. So then they're like, well, if I've got $1 million to invest, would I look at apartment in Elwood?
The affordability and older unit situation is something we're very familiar with in, say, the eastern suburbs of Sydney. And what we always found was one particular submarket group of units that was always in high demand and got some of the best prices were the garden apartments. So it was that fallback.
Yep.
Okay, so you could at least have a kid and throw the kid in the back area.
Absolutely. Yeah. You stole my thunder there, Ken. I actually meant to say that. The garden apartments, absolutely perfect. I mean, especially if you've got a, courtyard on title, it suits the downside. It's got the little dog, and it suits the family who wants the dog and the one kid. And they're super scarce. Developers aren't building them, right? And so that's the stuff that would do really well in Melbourne, especially a very cute looking Art Deco building with nice gardens on a beautiful street. Surrounded by, very few other apartment blocks and ideally expensive houses. You do well. But I guess I'd just be thinking, is that the most optimal way to invest your money, could you go into a housing market in different parts of Melbourne for that, Could you go in the north? Could you go in the inner west? I don't know, but that's what I'd be thinking.
I don't think you can for $1 million anymore, can you, Ken?
It's getting tight, but you could have potentially 12 months ago, right?
Yeah.
It'd be worth exploring that to then go, okay, well, if I've got $1 million budget in Melbourne, is that the best place?
I guess it's a case of two. You've got something halfway in between the villas. The capital growth is about halfway in between as well. So if you can find villas or even townhomes as opposed to apartments, and it's a halfway between the two in terms of style, but also capital gain.
Well, it's a good point, Ken, because you could go that. You could go, look, I'm going to go for the housing market in the inner north or inner west, or maybe I'll go for the villas and I'll go down Bayside, right? I'll go down towards Brighton and down the sort of Sandringham train line. And that could also make sense. If you get a bigger 2-bedroom villa with a little garden, with parking in a nice, cute street surrounded by $4 million houses for $1 million, you'd probably go for that as well.
Or they'd rent like houses any day of the week.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. Yeah, rents aren't much different, right? So,
yeah,
cool. So hopefully that helps that person in Elwood.
Zachary. Amelia, she has said the suburbs that we are interested in are Ferny Hills in Queensland. As an investment, looks attractive as there's a development underway building a shopping centre plus apartments over the Ferny Grove train station. Note that we are interested in established home, and Ferny Hills and Ferny Grove are under different councils. Another suburb we're looking at, and I don't know how they can put the two together, but this is for a principal place of residence, and that's in Taruna, Tassie. Love your work. Thank you, Amelia. Love your work too. So let's hit Ferny Hills first. That's sort of outer, isn't it? Sort of acreage, Brisbane, out near Stanford. Is it Stanford?
Samford Valley, just on that north side. So if you kind of go up and go to the Gap, and then you go up a couple of suburbs just north, you've got Upper Kedron, and then you hit Ferny Grove. That's the first one. And then if you go further up again, you hit Ferny Hills. Some of these have got some lovely views, nice vistas and views. Ferny Grove, I think, has the train station, obviously, and I think it's the last train stop along that particular line.
The end of the line.
The end of the line, and then you go up into Ferny Hills. Now, of interest though is
it's a catch 22 though, isn't the end of the line. In the morning, it's great. You get the first one on the train, and you're guaranteed a seat. If you on the way back, you can be standing out for a long time if it's a busy train, right?
Yeah, and people, I've read some blog posts about the Gap, and anyone who has to kind of get in the traffic at peak hour trying to get into town on the Waterworks Road, they often complain that it's a fairly long queue getting on and getting through the lights and whatnot. So, but the Gap has continually stood out as a really high-performing suburb, and the numbers put Gap on the radar all the time for me through the last 12 months. So, and then now it's starting to, the prices are pushing up for the Gap, for example, up, it's nudging towards that $1 million mark. suddenly the ripple effect starts to kick in. So, Ferny Grove, Ferny Hills, if I were to pick between the two, I'd be going for Ferny Grove. I think Ferny Grove, it's a tighter market. It's got a slightly higher price, but it's seen higher growth at the SA3 level. So it does belong to a different SA3 as well as belong to a different council. So the SA3 level, it's grown 4% more in the last 12 months. So the SA3 that Ferny Grove belongs to has grown by 28%. So it's had a huge surge. But based on current market conditions, it still has growth ahead of it. One other thing that stands out is the socio-economics of these suburbs. Both of them have a score of 9, which is really high. And that's always a good thing. If you're trying to discern or make a selection between suburb A, B or C, and all the other metrics look rather similar, that's a common go-to for me. And the C for scores of 9 means it's a fairly advantaged couple of suburbs.
Is that sort of acreage, those lifestyle blocks, is that the sort of property you get out there?
Not really. I think you've got to go a bit further
on the other side.
down and
Valley.
on the other side. That's not really the spot where you're going to get that.
I remember someone who sold out of Newport many, many, many years ago and built up there on a 2-acre block and did their money basically. Though it was quite some time ago, but it's just like nothing happened in that market for years,
Well, nothing really happened in Brisbane, in fairness, for a long time, right? And it's just played catch up in the last 2 years. I think we've had lots of clients look into. We've had clients buy in sort of Kedron, in Everton Park, Mitchelton. These had clients originally. We had some investors sort of in the Bardens and the sort of that whole pocket. So people are shifting further out because those other suburbs have gone up, 50, 60, 70, 80%. I did a valuation on client's property in Barden last week. They bought it for 670 and they got about 1.25.
But Barden's been a
renter.
Star, absolute star performer.
And that's not too far off other suburbs. We've got a client this morning that bought in Balmoral for $1 million. That's worth 1.75 now.
In what period of time though?
3 years, if that. So, a lot of the inner rings, and these are old Queenslanders around the city that our clients were buying. Client bought in Ascot for 1.1. It's worth they've had offers at 1.7, 1.8.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. People are pushed out there because of price point. What I like to do is obviously the train, but I also like sometimes test the drive. So you can go on Google Maps and put in 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. the next day and see how long it's going to take. And it gives you sort of a rough time frame. It's either you get a really good run or you get a really bad run, it seems. It could take anywhere from 22 minutes to 50 minutes. And that sometimes forecasts the traffic as well. And so you can see that could be an issue when you go further out. There's a few places it can really sort of clog up, which is what Kent was talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it is also covered by escarpment though. So you've got land that you can't keep on building out. So you can't just keep releasing greenfield estates. It's leafy. It's, older houses on reasonable blocks with little development. So I wouldn't buy there for the reason they mentioned. They're building a shopping centre with some apartments. I mean, a shopping centre's not going to change the world, but it might create a bit more of a vibe in the area, I guess. But that's not the reason I'd be buying there. I'd be buying there because it's got great lifestyle without the shopping centre. It's got good schools, it's got nice blocks, and it's obviously what higher income families are willing to sort of move towards.
And I guess the temptation might be to look at units though, rather than houses. And I imagine there's been a bit of a difference in performance there, Kent.
Yes, when I read it, I read it a little bit too quickly, and I thought, oh no, you're looking at a new apartment there. So hopefully not.
No.
But if anyone else is thinking about it.
So no, and then the last suburb was a bit of a random all the way down into Tasmania, so a suburb called Taruna. And this is a lovely part of the coastline just south of Hobart. So rather expensive suburb just to the north called Sandy Bay. So it's Battery Point, then Sandy Bay, then you hit the suburb called Taruna. Now its asking prices at the moment, give or take, around $895,000. So not not overly cheap, but I tell you, the performance has been phenomenal in Hobart South and West SA3 in the last year. It's had 28% growth. It's been rather strong.
It's a pretty sexy place. If you look at the properties, that's what Hobart's got, right? The houses on the hill overlooking the bay, and you can build some beautiful dream homes. And there's lots of properties selling, over $1.5–2 million down there. And it's all landlocked. It's still very close to all the other premium suburbs. I'd be interested to know what the local schools are like. That's what my head would go to. Can you get the cashed up retirees buying there? But would the high income families in Hobart live there? And is there good schooling options for them? Because if they're not, then your market's going to be smaller, right? Especially, private schools, high schools don't matter as much. I think you're willing to put your kids on the bus to go to a good private school. They're going to deal with that commute. But the primary schools, you don't want to be driving, an hour every day to send your kid to primary school. So you're going to really miss the family market. So that's what I'd want to know. What schools like around there? And are younger families moving in there? Is that or is it just really the older cohort?
So throughout that SA3, there's been a fairly steady increase in listings. And inventory's been building fairly consistently month on month back since September. So I'd say, if it keeps on trending the way it is, the market might start, by July or August, we might be saying this market's fairly balanced. And it's been a long time since we've said that of most suburbs in and around Hobart.
Yeah, and we have had some other questions around Hobart, so we could expand the conversation a little bit right now, because of course Hobart has been amongst the top performers for the last few years. We've met many years doing nothing. Have investors and tree changers been responsible for that? The migrants or the people going back there from the mainland, and is it continuing?
Well, I mean, I know of a number of people that have kind of exited Hobart, tried to find, in attempt to work or find work. So a lot of them have been economic refugees, but loved the place and couldn't wait to get back. So, in terms of lifestyle, and beauty, hard to beat. So the big thing that's obviously changed is, the old analog boomer CEOs have realised that you can work from home.
I think the interesting thing is people to do that, it'd be cashing in from somewhere and then moving there. It's the affordability play. Like we can move and we're debt free. We can sell our house in Sydney, Melbourne for $2–3 million and buy something down there. But now they're going to pay a lot more for the place down there because they've gone up so much.
Yeah.
And then the market they're potentially selling out, they're not in sometimes it's maybe not the best property in Sydney, Melbourne, in the best part of the suburb, and you're starting to see a stock increase of poorer properties, and maybe there's a big coming off in the market, right? And people are going to go, we could have sold for 2, now we can only get 1.75. It's actually still quite hot down there. Now my changeover is only 500,000–600,000, not $1 million, what I thought it would be 6 months ago. And so I do think that will then also cause less people to sell, less people to move interstate, and then the return to work things. Obviously, nothing's guaranteed, but it's going to be interesting to see how that battle plays out. Obviously, I was looking at Apple this week, and Apple want their staff to come back to the office. And Apple's meant to be the biggest supporter of remote work out there, right? And they're saying come to the office 3 days a week. So,
that's not too bad. It's just hard to do that from
Hobart,
Tasmania.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Unless Apple open a head office in Tasmania, that's the other thing. If you go to a satellite office capital city like off of Sydney, Melbourne, or Brisbane, if they say come back for 3 days, you can still do it. But flying from Hobart to Sydney 3 days a week,
it goes up. One call out for me is this exodus phenomenon and the COVID phenomenon is a lot of these regional markets, or the secondary city type markets, they've boomed because of an increase in demand, but there's the constraints aren't land-based constraints. The constraints have been supply through human supplies,
Yep.
So soon as the dust settles and those other human-related constraints can lift, suddenly there could be almost an infinite new supply of housing stock, whereas you won't have that constraint long-lasting in the Sydney, inner Melbournes, etc. That's the thing to watch for me. And I keep on going back to Bellingan as a benchmark for that. Look at Bellingan prices right now.
What's
huge.
happening in Bellingan? Do tell.
Well, just this issue that you've had this flurry of love and demand.
Yeah.
And then you do the old map thing like we like to do, and it's like, whoa, there's a lot of green there.
Although the thing is with Bellingan is a good example of a flood zone. There's a river, and it's known, the locals up there know, that there's a whole section of the town that gets cut off in a big flood. So
I think Bellingan's like an example where they probably wouldn't, for building cost materials, council controls, NIMBYism, the greenies, etc., would struggle to release lots of land. There'd be restrictions. But if you think about greenfield estates, absolutely, things on the fringes, the affordability market that absolutely had restricted supply because not many people were selling, huge increase in demand because of low interest rates. And then you had this home builder stimulus, which meant people bought new, and then you've got all these new buildings coming on, builders now looking for work, people looking to sell, and the dynamics completely flipped the other way. More supply than demand, and then potentially people under financial stress with higher rates. So I agree, Kent. That's exactly low supply plus a huge increase in demand has caused prices to go up, not just low interest rates and lots of demand.
It was a sugar fix.
Yeah. What's the next one, Kent? Love this karaoke. It's good fun.
You like it? Yeah. So the next one is Colleen. Now I'm stealing your section on the sheet here, Veronica.
Go for it.
Colleen, she wanted Victor Harbor and an adjacent suburb called McCracken in South Australia. Now, Victor Harbor, look at the photos, a beautiful location, but it's a long way away from anything.
It's a bloody long way. This is actually not a listener. Colleen is actually an old client of mine. She rang me from Adelaide the other day and said, "Oh, Veronica, I found this place in McCracken. I wasn't really looking. But oh my God, look at it. I got online. Now, the particular place that she pointed out, I immediately went, I wouldn't buy that for lots of different reasons. But she said, it's the end of the train line. Adelaide is going to extend down here surely. And I'm like, it's a long way from Adelaide. It's like McLaren Vale's halfway or something. But I did think this is interesting because when I looked at the map, and as we like looking at maps, I just thought there's a shitload of coastline. If you want to do a sea change from Adelaide, that you could be within an hour's drive, really. Now, this is about an hour and a half away from Adelaide, isn't it? But
it's quite far.
But yeah, it is. But I just still thought, look, let's talk about this because I actually heard of Victor Harbor. Someone else was mentioning it recently. I thought, let's.
I've been there.
Yeah.
Our pre-kids, romantic trip to the wineries. I think it was my wife's birthday.
That's beautiful.
Stayed in the Barossa, Adelaide Hills, McLaren Vale, and we stayed on a houseboat in Victor Harbor overlooking I guess it's what do you call it, a wetlands with all these birds are flying into the houseboat, etc. It's very beautiful, but it's a pretty long way from the city, and it's not going to be driven by sort of the affluent home buyers or affluent sort of second home sort of people, right? And I think that's the issue here is that, you can get something cheap and affordable, but is that the fundamentals going to change? Are people going to all of a sudden go, right, let's move our family down to Victor Harbor and we're earning really good money and it's my dream location? That would be my challenge. It's not the prettiest part outside Adelaide that you could choose. Would you just go to Barossa? Would you go to McLaren Vale? Would you go to Adelaide Hills? Would you go somewhere down the beaches?
Well, the socioeconomic indices, if you look at the neighbourhoods, the SA1 neighbourhoods that make up Victor Harbor, we've got 4 ranked 1.
Ooh.
We've got another 4 ranked 2.
Okay.
3 ranked 3, and the highest ranked neighbourhood is a rank 4. Now, I know that sounds snobby, but if you're making economic decisions, big economic decisions, you will use every number at your disposal.
Yeah,
and that's a good number to look at.
We couldn't get food, so I think we had to order a pizza from the pub or something because there was no food options. And then we went to the pub to pick it up, and it was it's a good experience. I had a beer in there, and but there was nothing going on in the town. It was a little bit of what's the word? What's the thing that flows down the street? What's it called? Sorry, edit all that. No, I need That's the edit all that. The
No, leave that in. It's much more
not
fun.
crickets. That's tumbleweed.
Oh, tumbleweed.
Yeah.
That thing that runs down the street. Oh, cars, trucks, buses.
Yeah, exactly.
Tumbleweed.
And you could hear the tumbleweeds sort of going down the street. So yeah, it's.
Yeah.
gold.
And the
Thank
banjo
you.
playing. Ding-a-ling-a-ling. Okay.
I don't know. Now you're being judgmental.
Okay, we better not. No.
Edit that. Good luck with that.
Don't want to insult anybody. Yeah, okay. So a bit too far away, low CIFA scores. And yeah, but there is a train line. And this is a good example. I guess people go, but there's a train line. There's a train line. As if that's the single most important ingredient to actually choosing somewhere to live. I used to live close to the end of a train line, right? And in the Shire. And I have to say that you wouldn't use the train at night because it did not feel safe at the end of the train line. Like when in the inner city, I'll get the train at night anytime. There's lots of people around, but yeah, and these extremities, personally, I wouldn't buy at the end of a train line. I probably should have mentioned that about Ferny Grove. You don't go out at night, that's for sure.
CIFA 9.
That's different. That is different, yes. All right, so I better ring Colleen and say, Colleen, do not go and buy that
Colleen,
place for these other reasons.
Tune into the show.
Tune into the
Veronica,
show.
hit us with the next one.
Okay, we got Alan. And look, I've got a bit of a confession to make on this one. Do you know how a while ago, Chris, we changed our little promo in the podcast that it says, send your questions to at theelephanttheroom.com.au. We had a bit of a glitch and that wasn't being monitored. So this is a bit old, this question, Alan. And I do apologise, Alan.
Other people.
I hope you're still listening. But it was such a good question that I threw it into Suburb Karaoke. Okay, how do you see the future of mining towns in North Queensland going? We bought a 2-bedroom unit in Mackay in 2012. We lived in it for 6 years and moved to New South Wales. We kept it as a rental property and has been tenanted by the same person since. Rents have been slowly increasing and now the values are growing. The value is almost at our debt level, and if we were to sell, we would be left with little to no mortgage. This is the horrible, sad bit though. Over the 11 years of owning it, we've always had negative equity. Oh, 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom, 1 garage, decent sized yard, 3 in the block, cul-de-sac street, not far from the Mackay CBD. Right, the question is, should they sell now when they have zero equity and get rid of a poor performing asset, or have we been through the worst and should we hold on for the long term and look at keeping it as a high yield asset, increasing cash flow eventually?
Sell.
I would have thought that without looking at the numbers. Actually, just that story says to me, sell. But yeah, go. Tell us why you say that.
Okay, so houses and units in Mackay, both of them have had a poor 10-year track record. So houses, 0%, donut percent per annum in the SA3 of Mackay. Units have had a negative 1.9% per annum.
Ouch.
So for the sake of the good news story that rents went up $20 a week in the last 12 months, you've had to put up with a lot of bad news on the capital side of it. So units generally have a 55% lower long-term growth rate of houses. We covered that earlier on. But that's one of the reasons why they stand out on investors' radars, because it's positive cash flow, and you know the rest of the story.
Yes.
It's a trap.
Yeah.
Watch out. It's like the meme from Star Wars. So it is a bit of an issue, and there's going to be a lot more of these traps. So listings inventory in Mackay right now, they're starting to build. So they're heading towards that 8-month worth of stock. So I would say, it's probably going to start to get soft. It's going to soften further. So you probably would have been ideal selling it 6 months ago.
Which is pretty much when he sent the question. So my apologies, and I hope that you've actually made the call.
This is unfortunately the 2022 conundrum we've got with clients versus 2021. In 2021, we had lots of clients who came to us for properties like this, and we take advantage of first home buyers and investors who are entering the market right now, buying because of low interest rates and buying everything because there's FOMO in the market. And buying poor assets at big prices, because things can easily shift. And the affordability market's going to shift fast, because affordability is going to very quickly flip from 2% interest rates to 3% to 4%, right? And they're very much watching more because they've only got a little bit. They don't want to risk it. They're more likely to sit on their hands because they don't want to take a risk and lose all their money, etc. And so they're going to completely evaporate from the marketplace. Yes, there's going to be state government incentives like 5% deposits and stamp duty exemptions to get them to come back. But, your ship might have sailed, unfortunately. And, what you sell it for in 2022 might not be what 2021 is. The fundamental issue is that in Mackay, high-income families and high-income people in Mackay, are they ever going to want your unit? No. Can they build more of them? Yes. If prices went up for units, would they build more of them? Yes, because that means they could build more of them and they could sell them. And so absolutely, it's just flawed from a fundamentals point of view. You may not lose money on a dollar value because you may be able to sell it for, $10,000 more next year or 2 years' time. What you're losing is time. You've lost in this situation, not any money potentially, but you've owned this, 11 years?
It's the opportunity cost.
11 years. And what you've potentially gone from is when you could have potentially bought a really good asset and had now 11 years of growth and 11 years of rental increases that are now paying off the mortgage, etc. Now you're potentially at an age where you don't want to go back into residential property. So what you do is with your proceeds, you just pay off your home, and but you're not going to buy another asset. And so you haven't just lost 11 years in growth. You've lost potentially 20 or 30 years of growth of what you would have got if you bought a better asset 11 years ago. Now, I know that's not to make you feel worse, but what you are losing is the opportunity cost of time of being in a better asset. So if you wait 3 years, it's even more likely that you're not going to go and buy another property because you're going to get even closer to retirement and less wanting to buy property. So don't even know your age, Alan, but that's the issue, is the opportunity cost here of what you should be doing with your money and focusing your effort and attention on. And unfortunately, what we also see, Veronica, you'd see this too, because you're being burnt once, you then apply that same logic on the whole of, I hate property, I hate tenants, I'm just going to put my money in shares, or I'm not going to. And that's the biggest thing that we see is investors buy one, they make a mistake, they sell out, and they never go near property again because they've been burnt.
True.
They don't want to make the same mistake twice. So hopefully it works out, Alan. But I don't think the good news in 2022. But if you can just, we had a client sell an apartment in Brisbane just a month or so ago, and they've been clients for years, and they end up getting a really good price. I don't know how. They just got out. An investor bought it, and they got and they got a much better price than I thought they'd ever get. And so they maybe they were just on the tail end before this fear of rates really jumped, because it was a couple of months ago. But just have a crack and get out.
I think you said earlier there, Chris, that some people get burnt because of a bad experience, and this is an excruciating experience because it's been 11 years and they've had negative equity the whole time. And even now, if they sell, they only cover the debt. They don't cover the actual what they paid. Yeah. So I think that says to me that even if you've missed the boat, still sell is, you've obviously got to make sure you can pay out the loan, but it's costing you the longer you hold it, even if the prices have fallen again, So I think that that's something that has to be looked at seriously. But in terms of people like you're burnt, you'd never get back into property, think, oh, I'll buy shares instead. Honestly, I think a lot of people should think about buying shares rather than property.
Good point. Yeah.
And I don't know about Alan's circumstances back 11 years ago, but potentially it was driven there because of affordability. If people are driven to certain areas for affordability, they're thinking, oh, negative gearing because it might have been brand new, whatever it was. But if you actually can't afford a good asset and you're going to go backwards financially, it would actually be better not to borrow any money and just use your deposit and buy some shares. You'd actually be better off,
Super's been fantastic for a lot of people for the last 10 years.
Top up your super.
Absolutely can. People forget about super. Yeah. Absolutely. They go, well, I've started getting on top of my mortgage, maybe I should go buy an investment property. Okay, well, what are you doing? And what are you doing with your super? I don't know. Well, maybe I should maximize that. Well, maybe I should go and talk to an advisor around that. Or maybe I've got equity and means I've got to buy a cheap property, maybe I should just use that equity and buy some shares, or maybe I should renovate my house or upgrade my house. And unfortunately, people just go, easy decision, I'll buy an investment property, just without all those other comparisons, alternative strategies, financial advisors call them.
But I actually did a strategy session today with a couple who, they've got some money they could use today to buy an investment property, but not enough to buy a good one, right? And thankfully, they put their hand up and said, look, I just want to sort of get some advice around this. And, we were sort of talking about, I guess, their friends and social circle and their peers effectively all talking about their investment properties and all the rest of it. Now, there's pressure to conform that, it must be the thing to do, and there are lots of other ways you can invest. And there's a lot of people that losing money in property don't even know it. And they, even after they sell, they don't even know it. If they made a gain, they think they did well. They don't actually realise what money left on the table because they could have made other decisions. So I just think there's not enough consideration or a holistic viewpoint. And there's this too much faith of purely in property in this country.
People don't sit around the table or at the bar bragging about how much their super's gone up.
or they're that's hilarious.
Or they don't tell about how much their properties or their shares or their things have gone down, tanked. Right?
Yeah.
And whatever they do say, take it all with a grain of salt at a barbecue with a few drinks in behind their belt. You know what people are like. They always exaggerate their returns and forget the costs and forget, they had to reno that place. And you know what? It wasn't leased for 6 months. And, it's the numbers when we ask people around their incomes and their property values, then we say, all right, send us your pay slips. Oh, that isn't what you always told us you were earning. And, actually, you know what? You thought it was a 715 of ours coming at 620. And so, just be always careful of believing what people say as well.
Well, not only that, I've said it many times before. You've probably heard me say it before. You'll hear me say it again. It's the people that come to me and say, I've done really well in property. And I always say, tell me how, over what period of time, for starters. They'll always give me raw numbers, dollar figures. They won't give me percentages. They won't tell me what period of time. They won't tell me what their options were and whether that was better or worse than what they could have. Because no one thinks that way. They honestly, even the smartest people say to me, I made X dollars. I'm like, right, how long did you own it for? Yeah, like you say, Chris, did you spend any money renovating it? Like, seriously, it's not that simple. Anyway.
Yeah, we literally had that today, and we had that client who had a place in Melbourne, and great bloke. He just said, the property down here is doing really well, and I was like, right, bring it up on RP data, bang, what'd you pay for it? Right, what is it worth now? How many years you held it? You did the calculation in my head, right? Okay, so this is roughly what it's done. This is what houses have done, and right, okay, so it hasn't really done that well, right? And he's like, yeah, okay, but initially the conversation started is the apartment's doing really well, right? And, when you look at how long they've had it for a long time, and so, it's interesting how people, the story we tell ourselves until we start to lift the lid on how well actually something has gone compared to the comparison. So, if you're one of those people, don't be afraid to, challenge yourself, like it's just a learning for you to then, your next decisions. And that's the, you're never going to learn anything better than your own mistakes, right?
Now, these research tools are all available on my website as part of a free membership now.
Yes, Suburb Trends.
So there's a whole stack. There's heat maps. There's you name it. It's all there, and it's part of a free membership.
Suburbtrends.com.au. Put it in the notes. And actually, it's heaps of it, isn't there? Oh, I've got it as .com. Is it .com or .com.au?
It's both. It redirects.
There you go. It's fun to play with. Thanks, Kent. That's been another great trip around Australia. We didn't go to WA, but we've been almost everywhere else.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. I really enjoyed that. Keep them coming.
Let's do another one.
To our listeners, send us some new suburbs. We like to explore the map, considering we all just work from home all the time. So
we'll watch out for the emails this time.
It's like going travelling.
Yeah, living vicariously. Yes. Alrighty. See you next time.
If you're looking to buy your dream home or an investment property in Sydney's inner west, eastern suburbs or North Shore, my team and I can help you buy without regrets. Reach out via my website, gooddeeds.com.au.
If you're looking to buy your first home, thinking of upgrading into a new one, or purchasing an investment property anywhere in Australia, my team love to carefully guide you on this journey. And most importantly, get the finance right. Reach out via our website, wealthful.com.au.
Thanks for joining us. We'd love to see you again.
And remember, don't be a Dumbo.